The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to Scariest Paranormal Radio Podcast. It is Friday, and we are having another guest here tonight. Tonight we welcome paranormal guest Alexander Brown. He's an author. He has his own YouTube channel, and he is a paranormal researcher. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. Yes, it is. It is. I'm so excited. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I know that I didn't do it justice. I know you do a lot more than what I mentioned. I know you're an author, but tell us a little bit about your podcast. You have a YouTube channel, right?
I do. The YouTube channel I have is called Bookworm of the Damned, kind of a play on Queen of the Damned since, books and everything. But with the channel, what I do is I do book reviews for horror books where I review what to expect from the book, my thoughts on it, and then also give some backstory on what you can expect from the author and also what inspired that story. So that's more so what I do right now. I do still dabble in writing a little bit, but a lot of that I've just kind of pulled back from just to kind of reinvent myself, really.
Okay, and you've done a lot of paranormal research up in the northern Mississippi area. What part of Mississippi are you from? Refresh my memory and let everybody else know.
Well, I'm from Vicksburg, Mississippi, and practically the whole place is haunted.
Oh, yeah, Vicksburg. Let me tell you, folks, Vicksburg, I went to Vicksburg a few years ago, and as a medium, and of course a psychic as well, I was kind of caught off guard. It's what I call a psychic blindside. I was not expecting that the whole town was a battlefield. And to me, there's nothing more haunted than some of these battlefields. I mean, you've got the trauma, you've got the untimely death, you have all of the strong emotions that's embedded there. And I got to Vicksburg, and just driving through the town, driving through the battlefield was absolutely traumatizing. I was hearing cannons. I was hearing, getting flashes in my third eye of war going on. I was hearing screaming. I got to my hotel room. I couldn't leave the rest of the weekend. I literally had to hold up in my hotel room and have food delivered because I could not get out and look at anything because the psychic energy there was just so incredibly strong. So, yeah, you're living in a paranormal hotbed up there, Alex.
Yes, and that's very much true. I mean, I work in tourism. I can't necessarily say where I work in tourism because that would be a conflicting interest. But we'll have people who come in and they're like, oh, well, where should I go? That's the most haunted. I'm like, listen, you're in Vicksburg. You're already here. So it's all around you.
Yeah, I can attest to that, definitely. So Alex is here tonight, and I've invited him here because Alex had a very unusual situation in the course of his paranormal investigations in one of the most haunted cities in the U.S., and he's going to share with us his experience. So you had an experience with somebody who had a Ouija board go awry, is that correct?
That's correct. The problem had actually started before we did the Ouija session, and I know a lot of people look down on using an Ouija board, but my philosophy is if you know how to use it correctly and you have a blessed board and you go into this with prayers and everything, then you're going to have a positive reaction. And since this incident, I have continued to use the Ouija board and I have had positive experiences. But this is the one time where it was a negative experience. And this is before I realized how to correctly use a board.
I do want to give a disclaimer because we are recording Alex in Vicksburg. One of the most common things that happen with paranormal, whether it be on an investigation, and I have found with even interviews over the internet, is interference with electronic equipment. And I have actually done radio shows where voices have come over the internet onto the radio show, whispers, and also electronic interference. So if there is interference, bear with us because that's a very common occurrence. So just bear that in mind. Okay, now, Alex, I want you to start over a little bit and just kind of do, I'm not sure where you left off.
Right.
I think you went through blessed. You were talking about the blessed Ouija boards, and you've always kind of done that. Yes, just I guess start off with what happened with this situation that made it different.
Okay. Well, with the Ouija boards, these are something that I use to help me be able to connect with spirit in the situation. And this is before I actually learned how to use an Ouija board, which there's a lot of prayers and such that I do to go into an Ouija session. And this is back when I was just very raw to the idea, but it was, I'm pulling out my notes here. It was January 2010. So 10 years ago, just about. I had a friend who will remain nameless, and she was living in a house that was a new home. And she started having some problems there with seeing a white cat that would just come through her home. And other people had seen this cat. Personally, I had not ever seen the cat, but I had heard stories about it, and we kind of thought, oh, cool, a ghost cat. That's pretty neat, you know? And so she said that there were other things that were going on, like strange vibrations of the home, kind of negativity and such. And a lot of times when I go out, I have my protective wall up, so I do not really grab onto vibes unless I'm deliberately seeking those. And she decided that she wanted us to investigate the situation. And so myself and my mother, we went over to her place and we started doing the Ouija work and everything. And to start with, the session was kind of playful. It was like we were speaking with a child. And as the session continued going, the whole demeanor of the sentence structure and spelling, it changed. So this kind of indicated to us we were talking to a different spirit. Well, as we continued doing the process of elimination with questions and just asking question after question, we finally got to the point where it admitted it was a different spirit than the child that we were originally speaking to, which it was a male child that we had started speaking to. And with this, we asked what its name was, and it refused to give a name. Well, it then went to the number 6, moved away from the number 6, and then returned to the number 6 for a second time. And I was anticipating like the third 6, you know, I was kind of like thinking, okay, this is really going to be kind of gimmicky in a sense if it moves to a third 6, but it never did. And that's kind of what confused us a little more. Well, as we continued talking, the whole vibration of the house, it just changed. It became very low, became very dark, somewhat depressing, very depressing, actually. And oh, as I'm talking about this, my heart's racing, just reliving it. But we were finally able to get a name out of who we were speaking with. And the name that came across was Belle. And we had no idea what this was. We weren't like educated in demonology or anything. It was just there. It was a name that we had never heard before. And so we finished off the session, and this is where research comes in. Which, by the way, whenever I do an investigation, I like to go into it blindly. I don't want to know the backstory of the place. I don't want to know what all is going on around it. I just want to go in as open-mindedly as I can, and whatever I receive, then that's where the research comes in to see if it is justifiable. Well, we started doing our research and discovered that with this specific entity, it was a king in hell. Well, it is a king in hell that is over 66 legions of demons. And when it makes itself known, it comes in the appearance of a white cat, a toad, or a man. And it just so happens that she had had the hauntings of a white cat go through her home. And this is research that we conducted as soon as the Ouija session was over. And so we were still at her house when this happened. And we were like, all right, we have no idea what to do with this. This is out of our hands. Luckily, Mom had a friend who was is a Catholic priest. And so we decided that we were going to talk to him for advice. So we leave her house that night, and about a week passes. And in that time, we've started, I say myself and my ex at that time, he lived with me. But we started noticing things in my home. And what happened was it started small. And it took place over the matter of about a good, I'd say 2 weeks, a week to 2 weeks before we realized what was going on. But my home is always a home that's been open. It feels like home to anybody, and whoever walks through the front door, they're treated like family. And we had friends who came over, and they were the first ones to start noticing the vibrations that we were experiencing, which were the low vibrations. And friends would come over and they would say, the house just feels stuffy. I don't know what you've done with the place, but it doesn't feel as welcoming. They were pretty blunt about it. And where they would normally stay for about 3 to 4 hours at a time, they would come over and only stay for about 30 minutes and leave. And I wasn't too certain that what had come home with me was the entity that was at her house. But after experiencing the anxiety that built, the depression that came with it, the constant arguments between myself and my ex, which we had been at a good place during that time, but the arguments just picked up, and it was over so many nitpicky things, and the tensions were just high. And I decided, out of curiosity, I gave my friend a call who said her home had been haunted by the white cat. I called her up and I said, well, how's things going at your house? And she said, oh, they're fine. Ever since y'all came over, we haven't seen the white cat anymore. Everything feels like it's gone back to normal. The house just feels relaxed and everything. And it was at that moment that I realized that what was in her house had followed me home. And this was something where, it's like, even as I'm telling this story, I'm standing outside of my home because it's something that is still very tense to talk about. And it's something where I'd rather speak about it outside of my home versus inside, even though we do constantly cleanse our home with sage and prayers. But,
well, I have to tell you that every now and then your voice drags, and all of a sudden you go into slow motion. There's definitely some interference going on as you speak of it, and I do, for the sake of clarifying, because at first when you said the name Belle, I thought you meant Belle, like a girl's name, Belle, which would be French for girl. But you are talking about basically the demon that some people would pronounce Baal, Baal. Is that correct?
It is. Yes, it's spelled out Baal. Yes.
Right. Yeah, and that is a demon, and he's sometimes represented as a man with 8 legs of a spider, and a man's head with also the head of a cat and the head of a toad. So. It's very, very, very interesting. And what's interesting is, and I'm not an expert on demons, but a lot of people want to scream demons. But usually, when you have cases where there has been, actual demons, the typical thing that happens are illnesses that can't be explained, conflict in the homes, people having conflict on their jobs. So a lot of the things that you were experiencing were things that commonly happen with people who do get this sort of negativity attached to them. I just want to clarify that in case people were getting confused, because at first I thought you did say Belle, as in Belle.
Yeah, that's correct. It is Baal versus Belle. And it was, this was the only time I've ever entered what I would consider to be a demonic presence. And since this was my first and only time, I had honestly thought that the the haunting would have been different. I had seen too many movies like Amityville Horror. I had read too many books like Ed and Lorraine Warren and stuff, and just a lot of propaganda stuff. But when it boiled down to it, it really worked on our emotions. It really worked on the emotions of anxiety, depression, anger, sadness, all of that.
Are you
Pretty
walking
much
further away from your home or something? Are you moving around that you're losing transmission?
No, I'm out on my back porch, just kind of hanging out in the same area. I'm sitting down, as a matter of fact.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Because it's like totally you went out. In fact, I may not even edit this out because it's interesting that it's almost like something is preventing you from saying what you have to say. And I'm not trying to be biased about this and add that as a suggestion, but I mean I've seen this before in certain broadcasts. So, but anyway, if you could repeat what you that last sentence because I don't think we got any of that.
Sure. Pretty much, when I realized that her house had no longer had the issues and it had moved to my house, I at that time decided to ask her, well, when did the problem start for you, and how did it come about? And she explained that she had had a New Year's Eve party and there was a lot of mixed people there. And there was one individual who was there that was a very negative person. She said that she didn't even want him at her home, but he came with a friend. And and he had dabbled in the occult a great deal. And I think that's what had really scared her, was he was really dabbling in some nasty stuff. And after they had the party, it was just a few days afterwards that she had started seeing the white cat around her home. And even though during this time of the anxiety increasing and such, I did not see a white cat at my home, there was a toad that decided to hang out on my front steps for throughout this time. And what we did was we contacted my mother's friend, the Catholic priest, and we told him what happened. And he had explained to us the best thing to do would be to pray to Saint Michael, which we did. We did a house cleansing that regarded burning white candles to release positivity, black candles to absorb negativity. We burnt sage, did the Lord's Prayer, the prayer to Saint Michael. And then he also suggested that we do the prayer. Let's see, I have it written down right here. It is the Epiphany Blessing of a Home prayer. And this is something that you do at your front door and back door of your residence, where you use chalk, you write on the doorstep of this specific prayer, which is most people prefer to write it in, let's see, most people prefer to write it in Latin, I believe. I think that was what it was, but we just stuck with like the English versions of it. But you do it for year to year. And you can find the prayer online, the Epiphany Blessing of a Home. And after we did that, I would say it took about a good half a month of doing this. It really started to lighten up. And after the course of this time, friends started to come back over. And by simply doing these prayers to Saint Michael, the prayers of the Epiphany and the Lord's Prayer and burning the sage, we started having friends come back over, and they would start saying things like, "Oh, this house feels so much more open now. It feels more welcoming. I don't know what you've done to the place, but it feels like how it did like a few months ago." And so that was really interesting to see that by prayer alone, people who had no idea what was going on, because I didn't share this story with any of our circle of friends, people who had no clue of what was going on could tell the vibrational difference of my residence simply by working prayer. And
Wow.
since then, we haven't had problems, and that was about 10 years ago. And Carrie and we constantly clean the house with sage. We're firm believers in sage. And we do pray quite a bit to keep negative spirits out. And as I mentioned, since that occurrence, I do still use the Ouija board, but I enter it with a lot of prayer. I enter it with praying St. Michael, the Lord's Prayer. We do a house cleansing. And the occurrences we've had with the Ouija, especially when it's involving a third party who is mourning for a lost loved one, we have received information that only they would know. And it's brought more closure than anything to people over the years. So it's not something that I entirely blame the Ouija on, because there was already a problem there before we used the Ouija. It's just that it came through and spoke through that tool. But at the same time, using an Ouija is not a toy whatsoever. It's not something that's a party game or anything, but it does have its positives and negatives. And that first experience, that's as negative as what I could consider.
Well, yeah, and I think people don't realize is, and the actual board, Ouija board, is sold as a children's game, ironically, but there's many, many different forms of communication boards out there, and it's not the board that's evil, it's the lack of knowledge of, anytime that you're working with the other side, you're opening and closing portals, basically. You're opening and closing the other side. And, the big rule of thumb is if you open a door, you better know what's behind it, and you better know how to close that door. You got to know what you're dealing with over there. And when you start trying to, as a medium, I'm a medium, and we do not choose who we're speaking to. We are using, not to be religious, but we're using prayers. We use our own prayers that we, depending on your spiritual path, how you open and close those doors and how you protect yourself. But, we're opening ourselves up to spirit to use us, to communicate to loved ones, to give messages. But by no means are we trying to manipulate and talk to specific spirits. That's kind of against the rules. You can't really do that. But the minute you start dabbling and you don't know what you're doing and you're opening up that door, you don't know what you're opening it up to. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could be attracting things that might present itself as a spirit of a dead person, and it may not be. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Or, people start taking advice. They start asking advice on their life from something on the other side. And you don't know what you're dealing with. But, the general rule of thumb is the first thing you have to learn as a medium is how to open and close a portal. So if you don't know what you're doing, you really shouldn't be trying to communicate with spirits on the other side. You really have to respect it, and you really have to understand the spiritual aspects of it. So I'm assuming that that's what you learned in this process, huh, Alex?
I learned the hard way. Yes.
We're going to take a short break for this commercial.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about, the Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spookhouse. This is real.
And we're back.
What did you take away from this experience? I mean, and people don't realize, I won't go and do house cleanses. I know people who will go and do house. I won't do them. And I just, because I'm ever so aware of how whatever energy has to go somewhere else, and people will go and do cleanses on people and cleanses on houses. Well, where do you think that stuff's going? Even if it's not an actual entity, if it's just residual energy, it's still got to go somewhere else. And I know how much work it is to try to pull some of that stuff off. And even residual negative energy can make you sick. And it's a lot of work. It's hard work having to do those cleanses and having to constantly battle against that negative stuff. And once you've had to go against that kind of stuff, you think twice before you really, do I really want to do this? And people don't realize how much work it is. But if you're not willing to do that work, you should not be opening those doors. So, I mean, at the end of the day, did this change the way you viewed the paranormal after having this experience?
It totally did. Because the thing is, I really considered that growing up, I had always been told that spirits do exist. The spirits of our loved ones, angels, demons, they all exist. And so that was something that I had already gotten into the paranormal understanding, and that I was already open-minded to. But this specific circumstance made me realize that if someone says, hey, we have this going on in our home, why don't you come check it out? To tread lightly, because what might seem like something fun to them is something that's really negative and harmful. And because of this reason, I don't do house cleansings. I will tell people what they need to do for house cleansing, but I will not put myself in that circumstance, because it only took me that one time of being at a personal residence, of experiencing how it can follow you home if you are not protected, and how all of that's going on in one individual's household can then take place in your household. It was a complete turn off to doing that. And as a matter of fact, as far as like investigations and such go, I really pick and choose. I do not go anywhere. Yes, I do not go anywhere that has a negative history to it. Like if someone's like, hey, we're going to go investigate this abandoned asylum or this abandoned police station or whatever. No, I'm not going to go investigate those places. Whatever's hanging out there is nothing but negative. Nothing from places like that gain positive vibrations. And so it's just something that I rarely stick to. Now, there have been times before where there is a antebellum home here in Vicksburg, and I had a friend who worked there during some time, and she was very new to the whole paranormal thing. She had really shunned it because it frightened her, and she worked at this location knowing that it was haunted. But the times that I had been in there, it was just vibrations that felt peaceful and felt welcoming. It wasn't anything that frightened me. So on some of the nights that she was the most afraid, I would go up there and be with her. And we would receive small signs like electrical signs, or, different types of smells of perfumes or cigars that just kind of went through the location. And these were things where I really felt the vibrations were good. And I said, no, don't worry about that. They're just hanging out there. I don't believe they're going to hurt you. And so that's a circumstance where I don't mind being around a haunting that has positive vibrations. But as far as people saying they need their house cleansed or come check this out at my local place, no, I don't do that.
No, it's really not good. I tell you, I had an experience a few years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with a place in New Orleans that was called the Upstairs Lounge. It was one of the worst horrible hate crimes here in our history. I think it was in the 70s or 80s, where someone had locked a bunch of people in a bar and threw a Molotov cocktail into the stairwell, to make a long story short. And it was a gay bar here in the French Quarter, and it was actually on Sundays being used by a minister who was starting a church and didn't have a church building yet, and he was doing his church service up there. and someone threw a Molotov cocktail in the stairwell and then called up there and said, your cab is here. And people were like, anybody call the cab? And somebody said, I'll go look. And when they opened that door, the backdraft sucked the fire up into that room. And I mean, it was just absolutely horrific. There were burglar bars on the windows. It was just an absolute, one of the most horrific crimes and one of the most horrific deaths in New Orleans history. And since then, it changed our laws with regards to fire escapes, burglar bars, padlocks on buildings on the outside. I mean, just everything changed after that because nobody imagined that something like this would have occurred. But several years ago, many years ago, I was invited by some people who were in town. They wanted me to take them in there. And I was really tired. I was teaching. It was Halloween. I was doing tours. And I said, well, I'll go in, but I'm not going to open up to anything. I'm just going to go in and videotape. Well, I got one of those psychic blindside things where I walked in, and I mean, it just hit me. And this was just a residual haunting. I mean, I want people to understand, the people who died in this building, 90% of all hauntings are residual. These people are not trapped there. These people have moved on. They've crossed over, but that energy from that trauma is there. The people who died in the war, the Vicksburgs, are not trapped on the battlefield, but it's all residual energy. And this was so strong that I was smelling the smoke, and I had a respiratory situation going on with me for about 3 weeks afterwards because of a residual haunting and because it was just so heavy and so negative. So that was kind of my moment of reckoning of, wow, this is pretty powerful, even when it's just a residual. So you really, you have to be careful. You have to protect yourself. You have to know what you're doing. And you really need to, take it seriously, because a lot of people will do things, just to try it out. Well, let's see what happens if we do this. And it's just really not a good idea. So,
Alex,
let
I want to ask you something because
sure.
We're going to circle back a little bit here, but when performing a seance or speaking with the other side and such, it's very draining. And what I want to know is if you experience this as well, because the times that I have opened myself up, it's extremely exhausting. And by the time I'm done, all I want to do is sleep, wake up the next day, just drink tons of water and eat all day. That's how I am after I open myself up.
Well, I would say what I would recommend for that is get some more formal training. If you're going to do mediumship, if you're going to open yourself up for communication, if you feel like that's a path for you, if you feel that Spirit's wanting to use you as a medium, then I recommend taking classes. You need to be properly trained and attuned. It's obviously something you have, but you have to learn how to raise your vibration. You have to learn how to open and close portals properly. You have to learn how to protect yourself, and you have to learn how to raise your vibration properly without getting drained. You should not, because if you keep doing it and getting to that level of using up all your energy to do it, you're going to get sick. And that's where a lot of people make the mistake. And again, it comes with proper training. There's people, and I can, once we're finished with the show, I'll direct you to somebody who does classes over the internet who can help you. And but you need to be sitting in circle. I mean, some of the things that I do as a medium. Number one, I constantly further my education. I'm constantly training under other mediums. I also sit weekly. I have a circle. I have a spiritual circle that I sit in circle, and I constantly do what's called sitting in the power. I sit with Spirit. So if you're not doing these things, you're not properly training yourself. I mean, you have to do it. I've been sitting in spiritual mesas and sitting with in circles, for many, many years now. So it's just something you have to do. If you don't do it properly, you shouldn't be using your energy. You shouldn't be that tired. It shouldn't be doing that to you. There's something missing if that's what's happening. And I can direct you where to go to help you fix that problem.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to keep doing that because it will weaken you and it can make you sick. That's the thing. Sickness, any type of physical illness, disease, all of these things, it happens first at an energetic level. And then it manifests on the physical, and that's what people don't realize. So when you're stressing yourself out energetically like that, it will eventually manifest itself as a physical ailment. So you want to make sure that you're doing things properly and that you are protecting your physical vessel, because if you don't, and you also don't want to be opening yourself up to the wrong type of spirit. If you don't understand that other side, that spiritual other side, you don't want the wrong thing walking into you. You really don't want to be opening yourself up to that, and that could be dangerous. You really don't want that. So because there's also such things as walk-ins and attachments and all of these things that you really don't want to set yourself up for.
Completely agreed. And that's exactly what I feel like the demon was back at my friend's house. Total attachment.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I wasn't there, but I mean, yeah, that's certainly a scary thing, and it's nothing to play with. It's nothing to dabble with. It's nothing to play with, and you do really have to be careful. But I don't. Over the years, people would call me and want me to come to their house. I've got something in my house, and usually within the conversation, I could tell, and I would say, "Well, what did you do?" And they'd say, "Well, I was playing with a Ouija board, or I was dabbling with, demonology, and I was doing some spell work, trying to conjure something." And at that point, I just say, "No, I don't want to. I'm not dealing with that." And I grew up Catholic, so I usually direct people to a Catholic priest, just because that's my spiritual path. There's many different spiritual paths, but the thing is, whatever it is you're dealing with, sometimes there's Native American spirits, sometimes there's spirits that are attached to the land, sometimes there's indigenous spirits out here. People will go and they go to, I know that like up around Natchez, you've got, these ceremonial mounds where there's a lot of indigenous spirits attached to those places, and they're not necessarily negative spirits, but they are protective spirits. And anytime you're dealing with, a spirit that is of a particular path, you've got to get somebody, if you get tangled up with one of those spirits, you've got to get somebody of that path to get that off of you. So this is really, it's nothing to fool with. It's nothing to make fun of or take chances with, that's for sure. But that's all of this stuff that we're talking about today is on my 10-foot pole list. Okay, it's like I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's like it's not happening. My motto is not my demon, not my problem. I didn't bring it in here. I'm not. I'm not. I don't feel that I'm trained to do it. Now I'm hoping to have on the show. In fact, I've got some people that are coming on the show that actually are not. That actually will head on with stuff like this. I'm not one of those people. I feel like that's not something I care to involve myself with. And I tell people, get a professional, get somebody that's trained to deal with this, because it is real and it is dangerous. And I have literally, working in this field for a few decades now, and especially working in the French Quarter. I mean, I have literally seen people eaten alive from the inside out by negative spirits. So it's really it's not a joke. it can really be dangerous.
And I tend to think to myself, had I not performed the prayers that were given to me to cleanse my home, then it could have gotten so much worse. I believe definitely emotionally than it had been. And just to receive that confirmation from my friends when they had come back over and said, "Your house feels so much more open. I don't know what you did to the place." That's when I knew I'm on the right track. I knew that.
Yeah, other people can feel it, sure. Yeah, you don't have to be a medium and all to feel it. We all can sense energy. I mean, we all can feel, whether something feels right or feels weird, So definitely, it's definitely confirmation. But yeah, you're obviously very sensitive to this, and you're obviously somewhat of a medium already. So I would say fine tune what you got, because, you're going to be attracting this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You see,
And
you don't want that. You don't want to attract the wrong thing.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's like, for the most part, I've had very positive experiences. I'm very blessed to be able to say I've had way more positive than I have negative. And
That's good.
and even with the property I live on, you had mentioned Native American spirits and such. Well, Vicksburg was a way station during the Trail of Tears, and pretty much we do have quite a bit of occurrences here where people have experienced spirits that could be Native American. And under one circumstance, I had a friend come down, and she was just staying the weekend, and she's Native American. And she's really deep into shamanism and, the whole animal wisdom, animal spirit sort of deal. And she had never set foot on my property before, but her first moment out here, she said, "Oh, I can feel all of my people through these hills in the field. I can feel them here." And I said, "So that's a good thing?" She said, "It's a great thing." So I'm like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you."
Stay tuned for more Scariest Paranormal Radio.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN. And it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about. The Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spookhouse. This is real.
You're listening to Scariest Paranormal Radio.
Yeah, those Native American spirits, they're not necessarily bad, but they're very protective. And, it's really funny because some of the most haunted places in North America, if you look deep enough in the history, you will find that there's Native American burial grounds associated with it. Or there were Native Americans killed there, or something horrific happened to the indigenous people there. And the more horrific it is, the more haunted it seems to be. And you see these in these most haunted places, and it's like, wow, okay, it's certainly not coincidental. It's definitely not coincidental.
Exactly. And the thing is, you should have no shame in saying, "Hey, this is out of my hand. This is not my territory. I'm not the person for this job. Sorry." And I've done that before. I hate telling people that, but I'm like, "I'm not your guy. Here's what you can do that would help until you get to a professional." But
right.
a good thing is knowing your limits. A good thing is knowing your limits.
Well, that's exactly right. I've had people tell me, "Oh, you're scared. You're scared. You just don't want to do it." And it's like, yeah, I'm scared. I don't want to bring that in my house, because I'm also aware of, and what people don't realize, people go, "Oh, well, I'll just do a cleanse." What people do not realize is it's not going to just affect you. It's going to affect the people in your life, the people in your household. So if you have a partner, it's going to affect your partner. If you have pets, it will affect your pets. If you have children, it will affect your children. If there's someone in your home who is not very well, if you have an elderly person, it's going to affect you at your weakest point. And if it can't go through you, it's going to affect someone around you. So, people who are working with this kind of stuff and they're not properly protected, they might go, "Well, it's not bothering me." But then you look around them and it's like, "Oh, but your mom's really sick and your uncle's really sick and all of these horrible things are happening around you, and you're constantly saying, 'Pray for me, pray for me, pray for me.'" And it's like, maybe it's these doors you're opening. You see, and people don't, they're not thinking outside of that. And I've seen it. I've seen it in action, and I know, and that was my biggest fear, was that I would bring something home to my child. And I didn't even want my pets exposed to some of this stuff. I felt like my home was my sanctuary. And there were things that I did not want brought into my home. My home is surrounded by crystals. I went up to the crystal mines in Arkansas, and I literally went into the crystal mines and got my own crystals and put them around my home. That keeps my home cleared and clean, because I don't want that stuff here. So I'm not going to go purposely stepping in it. And it's just part of being wise,
Yeah, and
What's that?
it's funny that you mentioned that, because there have been times before where I've actually come across stones or rocks, and I don't have a great knowledge behind any of that, but I'll come across certain stones or rocks, and I'm just drawn to them. It feels like they have a good vibration to them, and I will take those, bring those, and I will put them around my home and such. And it's kind of weird in a sense, where sometimes I'll feel drawn to an inanimate object like that and feel, okay, this is something good that needs to be in my home. And so it kind of feels like, in a sense, you're increasing your armor more and more. And that's something that I've definitely found interesting when it comes down to crystals, gems, stones, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I don't know all the different stones. I mean, I pretty much stick basically with the quartz crystals, because I know what I'm dealing with those, and that works for me. But yeah, I mean, there's a you can get heavy duty with the stones. You can stick with your quartz crystals and just do crystal grids around your house to keep the energy up and keep things cleansed. And my crystals are outside, so they're constantly recharged with the sun and the moon, so I don't have to do any of that stuff. But yeah, it's important. You really need to be aware and need to keep yourself. You have to protect yourself. You really have to protect yourself. And anybody that's doing any type of paranormal research, especially if they're doing the psychic end of it, they need to be doing adequate cleansing. Because if they're not, you can get sick.
Yes. And speaking about the cleansing, when you had mentioned someone was like, oh, well, if something negative follows me home, I'll just do a cleanse. No, just doing a cleanse, that's not it. You have to continue cleansing over and over and over. And it's something that could easily take months to a year, depending on the circumstance. And from my understanding, in some cases, it's something you'll have to do for the rest of your life.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, you're not just doing the cleansing; you're doing the prayers. You're
Yes.
working with, Archangel Michael, who basically, deals with fighting off the demons. So, I mean, and some people aren't Catholic; they might be working with something else. But nonetheless, I mean, you have to do other things. You have to. It's not just throw a little bit of salt around your house and some sage and you're done. I mean, you have to. If this is what you choose to work with, then, you have to take precautions and you have to do cleansings and clearings, But even doing in the course of a regular paranormal investigation, you do have to take precautions and be aware of what's happening around you and what the other people are doing. And that's why one of the first things you want to do if you're doing a paranormal investigation, for those people who are listening and they're new and they're just getting involved in this, one of the first things you want to find out is if someone's having what they believe to be negative occurrences in their home. You want to find out, when did it start and what happened right before it started.
Yes.
What is going on? Did this person do any type of ritual work? I mean, there's a lot of people out here that do what's called necromancy. They're trying to, work with the dead. They're trying to do ritual work with the other side, bargaining with them. It's always a big no-no. You don't want to try to conjure things. You don't want to try to, conjure up a demon to do your bidding. All of these things are really against the natural universal laws. And anytime you start doing this kind of stuff, you're asking for trouble. So, you want to make sure that what's going on in people's home is not something that they attracted or created on their own. Because if they did, then they need to fix that. They need to find the right person to come in and clean up the mess that they've made, basically. because it's not just a matter of having a paranormal investigation. They need help.
And I do want to also make a note about some of my personal experiences with paranormal groups. I'm extremely selective in what group I will be a part of. As a matter of fact, I'm not a part of any group at the moment because I've noticed in the past, if you get a paranormal group who is inexperienced to start with, and then they bring all kind of drama onto the set, and they have a lot of issues to start with, such as substance abuse, all sleeping with one another. I was in one paranormal group where they had practically all slept with one another, and every investigation turned into baby mama prom night drama. And
that's bad.
I distance myself from that because, one, I don't want the drama, but two, I really feel that when you have become a part of a team that is that negative, their already negative vibrations are not going to do good for the investigation that you're doing if you are trying to make contact.
No, it really doesn't. You know, if your intention is to create all this drama, you're going to create and attract chaos into the situation, and you don't need that. And I fully believe, and I've seen it happen so many times, where people can, you know, and I'm not talking about highly intelligent beings, but you can actually create your own, you know, little entities per se. They're not going to be highly evolved and they're not going to be intelligent, but nonetheless, if you have enough intent, enough drama, and you put enough energy into a thought form, you can create things to start happening, and it's going to have a physical effect on things. There's the laws of cause and effect, and one of the first things people need to understand are the universal laws out here. And if you don't understand these things, if you don't understand, you know, the spiritual hierarchies, if you don't understand any of this stuff, you need to educate yourself before you start stepping out into this realm. You really do.
Yes, and another thing that I'd like to comment on is if you become a part of a group where someone has the initial goal to become the next Zach Baggins or the Warrens, please don't become a part of that group.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, you know, and there's many groups out here where they are just looking at the scientific end of things, and that's well and fine, and all they want to do is document, because that's all you really can do. You know, many years ago, I was at a little conference where, you know, Lloyd Auerbach was there, and John Zaffis was there. You know, he's now the Haunted Collector on television, and Johnny Zaffis was up there, and he said, "What are you going to do? What are you doing during the investigation?" And everybody just sat there staring at him, and he said, "Let me tell you what you're going to do." He says, "You're going to document. That's all you can do. There's nothing you can do with this information. Nothing. Nothing you're going to do with it. You're going to document it. That's it. And if your intention is anything else, you're spinning your wheels." I mean, I've done paranormal investigations for television shows. I've done paranormal investigations for the tours. I've done paranormal investigation for my classes. You know, but at the end of the day, I've got my day job. You know, I'm doing it for a class that I'm getting paid for. I'm doing it for a television show. You know, nobody's going to pay you to be a paranormal investigator. And if you're doing it for ego, you're not coming from the right place. And please, if you want to be a medium, you've got to let go of the ego. If you want to be the medium or be on the psychic end of things, you cannot come from a place of ego. It won't work. It doesn't work.
I completely agree. And I think that ego is one of the big things that can drive away positive spirits. I think that ego is a big thing that can drive away positive vibes. If anything, it can open up the door, in my opinion, to things that are more negative.
Well, it just gets in the way of things. It absolutely gets in the way of things, and in the way of, as far as being a medium or actually communicating with spirits, you cannot come from a place of ego. You just can't. You can't. If you are going to be doing the thing where you want to communicate with spirits and you want to be a medium, if that's what your intention is, then you have to understand that you are becoming a servant of spirit, that you are representing spirit, and that you are there to serve them, not the other way around. And that there's no place for your ego. And a very good friend of mine, Sid Patrick, who's a medium, who actually was my co-author on seance experiments, and he always says, and I love this quote that he says. It's my favorite quote, and it's, whenever you show spirit who you are, spirit's going to show you who you are not.
I like that. I like that quote.
Yeah. So mediums. If you're out to become a medium and communicate with spirits, you really have to be able to put aside that ego and step down from who you think you are or what you think you're going to show everybody, because spirit's not interested in that. They're not interested in any of that. They really aren't. They're all just coming from a place of love and wanting to communicate with their loved ones. They don't care about impressing anybody. They're not interested.
Yeah,
they're just not interested. Yeah, they're not interested in all that stuff. But anyway, Alex, thank you so very much for coming on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. This has been such a pleasure to talk to you. It's been so long since we've talked, and I just feel honored that you took the time to come and share your story with me. I really do.
Well, I really feel honored that you had me on the show. I really appreciate it. I hope that the story I relayed can help some people who might be experiencing things similar to what I did. And once again, that is the epiphany blessing of a home that I use to help banish the negativity from my home. And all you have to do is Google.
All right, tell them how they get in touch with you if they want to check out your YouTube channel. Let everybody know how to get in touch with you, Alex.
All right. All you have to do is just go to YouTube and type in Bookworm of the Damned. And pretty much I try to add a little bit of humor with my videos. They're not for young adults because I can get a little nasty sometimes, but it's all in good fun.
All right. Alexander Brown, everybody. Thank you so very much, Alex.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Join us next week for another episode of The Scariest Paranormal. Have a wonderful night. Pleasant nightmares.
Cámbiate a Sprint y recibe 4 líneas con ilimitado por solo $100 al mes. Además, te damos 4 increíbles iPhone 11s por cuenta nuestra cuando entregas iPhone 6s o más recientes en cualquier condición. Compra en sprintya.com/iPhone, llama al 800 Sprint 1 o visítanos en nuestras tiendas. Teléfono luego de crédito mensual de $29.17 por crédito de 18 meses que se aplica dentro de 2 facturas. Si cancela temprano, el saldo restante se ve exigible. Requiere nueva cuenta. Unlimited Basic. Luego del 31 de julio de 2021 pagará $35 al mes por línea con AutoPay. Despreciación de datos durante congestión. Cobertura y oferta no disponibles en todas partes. Excluye impuestos, recargos y roaming. Aplican límites de velocidad, reglas de uso, cargo por activación de $30 y restricciones. Cámbiate a Sprint y recibe 4 líneas con ilimitado por solo $100 al mes. Además, te damos 4 increíbles iPhone 11s por cuenta nuestra cuando entregas iPhone 6s o más recientes en cualquier condición. Compra en sprintya.com/iPhone, llama al 800 Sprint 1 o visítanos en nuestras tiendas. Teléfono luego de crédito mensual de $29.17 por crédito de 18 meses que se aplica dentro de 2 facturas. Si cancela temprano, el saldo restante se ve exigible. Requiere nueva cuenta. Unlimited Basic. Luego del 31 de julio de 2021 pagará $35 al mes por línea con AutoPay. Despreciación de datos durante congestión. Cobertura y oferta no disponibles en todas partes. Excluye impuestos, recargos y roaming. Aplican límites de velocidad, reglas de uso, cargo por activación de $30 y restricciones.